The Department of Homeland Security and its ICE officers have a lot of homework due in the courts soon. And what started for me as an overview of what went down in Minnesota during Metro Surge turned into a Fourth Amendment rabbit hole. And here it is in 3 videos.
Happy Lost Your Job Day, Christy Num. You've really earned that. I was looking into Operation Metro Surge already when the news broke today. I was trying to make sense of all the court order violations that Judge Schiltz found, trying to figure out what conclusion to come to, trying to figure out why Metro Surge needed 3,000 officers in the first place if we're really primarily talking about daycare fraud and food stamp fraud, and bragging about 4,000 plus criminal illegals. I would love to see more evidence of how dangerous things were in Minnesota, because I went back to the Worst of Worst website. I plugged in just Minnesota. I found 493 mugshots. And to remind everybody that a lot of these mugshots, the violations listed are documentation entering the country after being deported, which is a crime, but not a dangerous, violent crime that needs 3,000 soldiers. Same with daycare fraud and other types of financial fraud. So the main question I had was, how is DHS doing? Because we had 4,000 plus, apparently, dangerous illegals, but we had 12% of the mugshots. With 3,000 agents and 3+ months, we could have gotten those mugshots. So I just don't buy it. Also, looked into these court orders violations, and by category: failure to release detainees after repeated orders from judges, sometimes even transferring the victims to other detention camps in order to escape having to release them. Unlawful detention of lawful individuals. Judge Jerry Blackwell noted that an overwhelming majority of the cases involved lawful presence. Withholding personal property, cash, jewelry, cell phones, driver's licenses. Whew. Violating judicial directives. The evidence is everything below, beyond arrests at sensitive locations like community centers and schools and places that just need protection from these activities. It's the constitutional violations, the obvious crime. Here are the sources. And again, happy firing day.
Somebody commented they keep wondering what they are doing with the personal effects, as in the guys in Germany's in the 1930s and 40s were large-scale plunderers or pirates. What a great question, and it sent me down the Fourth Amendment rabbit hole. Here we go. Attorney Rosen for DHS says that the search for personal items after ICE arrests is futile when public order is the objective. But really, if we ignore the basic rights of people in arrests, it is a dangerous, slippery slope from there. In the lucky encounters with ICE, where it's just property being destroyed, Judge Patrick Schiltz in Minnesota noted that in 96 court order violations, it was this destruction of property, where they enter properties without warrants, they break windows, they take doors off of hinges, and then they leave when they realize that they don't have a warrant and they don't have a person to arrest. They arrest people like they did at Target on January 8th without warrants. They realize it's a mistaken identity, and then they just leave people in the parking lot without any further contact, any further paperwork. Or the Chicago South Shore raid, where they not only destroyed property, took doors off hinges, overturned mattresses, they put children and veterans in the back of U-Hauls with zip ties for hours. They claimed that they were going after gang members. The landlord says it was a squatter situation. There were 37 arrests and 0 charges. Beyond the destruction of property is the injury to bodies. In Minneapolis,
Alberto Castanedo Mondragon had 8 broken bones, fractures around his skull, when he was admitted to the hospital. Agents claimed that he rammed himself into a brick wall to try and escape, but doctors immediately said that this was impossible and inconsistent with his injuries. So the agents were pressed, and finally one agent said he got his shit rocked. The Judge Frank in this case ruled that the arrest was unlawful under the Constitution. Agents had no warrant, no reasonable suspicion. Alberto lost his memory of his 10-year-old daughter. He told AP News of his daughter, "All those memories, for me, have been forgotten." Worst of all is we have to acknowledge the reality that once they have scattered your identity, that futile identity on the sidewalk, if you're detained, they might just lose your life. 2025, there have been 32 official deaths in ICE custody, and in 2026, so far, there have been 10 official deaths in ICE custody. Countless have been disappeared to other states or countries, never to be seen again, just as lost as their worker's permit blowing down the gutter.
I had been recording these as shorts, and so my time limit was 3 minutes. And I have been realizing that I cannot fit everything that I am finding into 3 minutes, which is why I am making this compilation video. But the Fourth Amendment video that you just watched didn't even cover the judicial response. So here in this next video is the judicial response to the cases that I had just laid out. The courts can hold DHS officers personally liable for the things that get lost during unlawful arrests, and it is starting to heat up. Here's the timeline. On February 18th, 2026, Judge Laura Provenzino fined government attorneys $500 a day until victim Rigoberto Soto Jimenez's documentation was returned to him. It took them 1 day to recover his documentation. On March 3rd, 2026, Judge Judge Bryan summoned DOJ officials to his court to answer for 28 cases of lost belongings. At the time, U.S. Attorney Rosen tried to say, for the DHS, that searching for further lost items is futile. Bryan shot back, "Can ICE just pocket property? Steal it?" He is now weighing both civil and criminal contempt charges. And because the government admitted to losing these items, they made themselves liable to full compensation by law. On March 5th, 2026, Judge John Tunheim ordered U.S. attorneys to personally oversee the recovery of a nail gun and cash. And then, 2 days later, Judge Tunheim made his formal order. DHS is to return or replace all lost property to all those victims that they wrongfully arrested within 30 days. He is ruling on April 6, 2026 at 2 p.m. If DHS has not met their condition, then they will meet civil contempt charges and daily civil fines. He also does not accept Attorney Rosen's excuse that the partial government shutdown impacts their ability to return items. A fact that I loved to read was that if the items cannot be located, DHS must reimburse based on the victim's accounting of the value of lost items. Tunheim also treats the arrests done during Operation PARRIS, which were the warrantless arrests after the Lions memo that said that they could enter homes with administrative warrants. Yeah, those arrests, he's treating them all as likely unconstitutional, or as he puts it, erroneous statutory interpretation. Another DHS lawyer, General Counsel James Percival, said or tried to say that the Fourth Amendment is not for non-citizens, to which John Tunheim said, and other federal judges said, the Fourth Amendment is for all people in the USA. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Fourth Amendment and DHS violations. There will be updates to this because there are a couple court dates that we are watching in this series. But there's even another story that I need to update, and it has to do with Midway Blitz in Chicago. and Judge Sarah Ellis's ruling that I based my legal observer scripts for ICE raids off of. And it turns out that those rulings are now vacated by the appeals court. And so I am going to look into that and update and give my takeaways on that next. So more compilation videos about other topics that have to do with DHS, the Constitution, and the courts are coming. Thank you so much.